But so you wanted to bring up the judges, Timothy, right? You wanted to bring up the judges. Here we go. We have another article, okay, from The Hill. Judge dismisses Trump suit against New York law blocking courthouse immigration arrests. Right? A federal judge on Monday dismissed the Trump admin's challenge to a New York law that blocks immigration arrests for people traveling to and from state courthouses. U.S. District Judge May D'Agostino rejected the administration's claims that New York's restrictions create unconstitutional obstacles to immigration enforcement and are preempted by federal law. To hold to the contrary would improperly elevate the concerns of the federal sovereign over that of the state and deprive New York of its essential ability to protect its sovereign interests in the face of undue federal interference, D'Agostino wrote in her 41-page opinion. Let me point this out to you. When it comes to the enforcement of federal law, that supersedes the state's desires, right? Because federal law is the culmination of an agreement by the 50 states where some people are going to reject it, right? But the majority decided to enforce that law or create that law upon the other 50 states. So if a state is doing anything to preempt, obstruct, interfere with the enforcement of federal law, right? It doesn't matter if you want to make the argument out to be that, oh, the state's sovereign interests. The state doesn't get a sovereign interest in the enforcement of federal law. The state gets a sovereign interest in how the state dictates things within the state that apply to and only that state. They don't get to exert their will over the other people of the country. And a state exerting its will over the federal government is disproportionately allowing states to have power over the people of the United States. Okay? In my humble opinion. You're obviously going to have constitutional scholars or legal authorities. They're going to disagree with me because they're going based on precedent. And all precedent is that a judge at one point decided to issue a ruling based on their opinion, and then that established precedent. And this is why I hate precedent and believe we should completely get rid of precedent within our legal system, because I don't actually think it's a precedent exists as a short-term solution for complex problems, but it doesn't actually resolve the underlying legal issues that are at play with whatever is being argued, right? New York passed the Protect Our Courts Act in 2020 after ICE ramped up courthouse arrests during Trump's first term, a shift from ICE's previous policy. So just remember this. The state of New York literally went out of their way to create a law in their state to prevent ICE from arresting people at courthouses, because they would prefer that instead of ICE arresting them at another governmental fucking location, that they have to go out into your community to fucking potentially harm innocent people while trying to detain and arrest illegal aliens. In a common sense world, it makes only more and more sense for ICE to show up to courthouses or police precincts or detention facilities to then detain already detained illegal aliens to have them deported from the country. The law immunizes any person from warrantless civil arrests when attending a court proceeding in which they or a family member is party or witness. Those protections extend when the person travels to and from the courthouse, and violations can carry criminal and civil penalties. D'Agostino's ruling upholds the law in two executive orders signed by then Governor Andrew Cuomo, which restricts state employees' ability to disclose information to ICE and prohibit immigration arrests in state facilities without a warrant. So do you see what they're doing here? They intentionally created a system where the federal government either has to run the risk of their arrest of an individual being nullified by a district judge because they were on their way to the courthouse for another crime they committed, or the federal government has to they're forced to have to communicate with the state to find out if this individual is on the way to the courthouse today or at this time before they arrest them, which gives the state preemptive warning to then warn the fucking illegal alien not to come to court. While they rule so it's funny, these judges are basically ruling that the federal government must communicate with the states, but the states get to choose whether or not they communicate with the federal government. Fuck no. And executive orders aren't the law. Executive orders are the dictation of the executive on how he wants members of his branch to operate. Executive orders can be unconstitutional. So executive orders aren't the law. Nobody voted on an executive order. That's not how this works. New York is not attempting to regulate federal agents, and it is not prohibiting the federal government from enforcing immigration law, wrote D'Agostino, an appointee of former President Obama. Yes, but this is how leftists have always framed every single argument. Oh, we're not getting rid of the Second Amendment. We're just implementing common sense restrictions. And then, oh, well, these common sense restrictions, well, clearly they're not enough because we still have problems, because the common sense restrictions weren't actually designed to solve the problem. They were designed to make you think they were doing something about it as they slowly chisel away at your Second Amendment right. Okay, this is how leftists always argue. Oh, we're not stopping them from enforcing immigration law. We're just restricting them from enforcing immigration law. And then that's so then they sort of solidify, right? They solidify one way in which they restrict the federal government from enforcing the law. Then they work on solidifying it in another capacity, in another capacity, in another capacity, to where the only way that you can fucking get illegal aliens is you have to give them 40 different warrants. You have to notify them you're getting ready to raid their room 3 hours in advance, their home 3 hours in advance, and you have to provide them with a car and gas in order to attempt to flee from you. But if they're fleeing from you, you're not allowed to chase them. This is the kind of dumb fuckery of the left that they're implementing in this country to break down the country so that they can control you. And you need to fucking wake up to it. If you don't want ICE in your communities, right? So you're saying you don't want ICE in your communities. So then if you don't want ICE in your communities, you're limiting ICE to have to arrest people at courthouses. They should be detained upon being released from a jail or a prison. But then you guys create a law where your state fucking law enforcement can't inform the federal government that on this day they're releasing this individual who's also an illegal alien. So you're intentionally releasing criminals, right, back into the community and then creating nothing but hurt. And this is the bullshit of what Timothy was talking about, how these judges are off their fucking rocker. And the Supreme Court really needs to start fucking clamping down on these fucking district judges. You really need to. And the Supreme Court already did. The Supreme Court already fucking came out and said these district judges do not have the capacity to issue nationwide injunctions. They can only issue injunctions that are pursuant to their district or the plaintiffs of the lawsuit from their district. Okay, but these district judges are ignoring the Supreme Court. So why is it a problem for Trump to ignore the Supreme Court, but it's not a problem for district judges to ignore the Supreme Court? Because remember, the context is that there's 3 distinct, separate, but equal branches of our government. And so if the Supreme Court is head of the judicial branch and the president is the head of the executive branch, they're kind of on somewhat of a level playing field in terms of authority and jurisdiction. But district judges are underneath that of the Supreme Court. So it's actually more wrong for them to ignore a Supreme Court ruling than it is the president of the United States. Okay? But not to mention with all this bullshit of the left and all this stuff, this is clearly a way to create a hurdle for law enforcement to not be able to enforce the federal law. Sure, are you saying they're not allowed to enforce federal law in your state? Of course that's not what they're saying. Leftists never come out and tell you exactly what they're going to do. They never tell you the truth. But this is intentionally a fabricated obstruction of the federal government to be able to enforce federal immigration law. And this is why the Supreme Court needs to fucking intervene. And all of these judges, they need to be stripped. They need to be stripped of their title. And they need to be fucking removed. But they're not going to be removed because the people in their district have to be the ones to impeach them. Right? So if everyone in your district supports an insurrection, right? This is exactly why the Insurrection Act exists, right? Because Abraham Lincoln went, well, all these people are committing acts of insurrection and they're all aligned with each other to commit fucking acts of insurrection and support each other without removing these people in the normal way in which you're supposed to remove those people. So fuck it. They're in an open state of rebellion. Activate the Union Army. We're going in and we're removing them by force. And this is the left intentionally creating these micro constitutional crises that are culminating into a major constitutional crisis in this country. We already asserted in the first American Civil War that the federal government and federal law and the Constitution of the United States supersedes the states. That is effectively what was decided in the first American Civil War. And the exact same people who started the first American Civil War are about to start the second American Civil War. And oh boy, can I not fucking wait for it. Because I'm so tired of having to play the bullshit bureaucratic fucking republic game of, oh, we need a vote on it. These people who are obviously obstructing us in an open act of sedition against the country, they're doing that, but they get a vote. No, fuck that, dude. I'm ready to change things through force, because that's all the left is doing. All the left is doing is changing things through force. So now it's our turn to assert ourselves over them. Rather, it is simply defining as a proprietor which activities are not permissible in state-owned facilities. Such conduct does not run afoul of intergovernmental immunity doctrine, the judge continued. The Trump administration sued over New York's law and the executive orders in June as ICE looked to, again, ramp up courthouse arrests with Trump back in the White House. It's simple, right? If you want to argue that courthouse arrests are wrong, then you cannot complain about arrests that are occurring in your community. You either support courthouse arrests and you drop the bullshit of how the left wants to keep talking about how, oh my God, they're dragging people out of their beds in the middle of the night. Oh my God, like the Gestapo, oh, blah, 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 all this other dumb shit. Well, then how do you arrest these people? Right? How do you arrest illegal aliens in the United States if you can't arrest them at courthouses, you can't arrest them in public, and then you get called a fucking Nazi if you arrest them at their house? Right? Exactly. You see what the left is trying to do. And anyone with common sense can fucking dictate that clearly what the left is trying to do is create a lose scenario where you can never get rid of illegal aliens. And this is why the Supreme Court needs to step in, because the Supreme Court not doing its job, because it's simple. As soon as the Supreme Court steps in and issues a verdict, right? Especially because a lot of their verdicts are in favor of this administration, it then gives the executive branch the legal leeway and the authority to go in and actually enforce the decisions of the Supreme Court, right? It gives the executive branch the authority to enforce the decisions of the Supreme Court. This is the most amicable and peaceful way to the restoration of our constitutional republic and good order and discipline within our country. We are a nation of laws. We absolutely are, right? We absolutely are. That is our culture. We are a very by the books fucking culture. And right now our culture is so fragmented because a lot of people don't believe in that. So the Supreme Court needs to step in, because if the Supreme Court keeps refusing to step in and issue rulings, right, that actually solve all of these fucking matters, we will have a second American Civil War. And it's not going to be as somewhat even-sided as the first American Civil War. Right? Because then that's when, like, you have to understand, that's when Democrats believed in guns and they actively believed in slavery and they actively believed in slaughtering Native Americans and forcefully fucking putting them on reservations. They actively believed in fucking all sorts of fucked up shit. Now it's the same Democrat Party. They don't believe in guns. They're taught to be scared of guns because they'll bite you. And they're taught to passively endorse slavery and segregation and fucking push policy based on difference, like observable differences. It's not going to be as evenly sided as the first American Civil War, where the Republicans had to come in and force the Democrats to get rid of slavery. You guys will lose again, and it will be fucking worse for y'all this time. Way worse. Way fucking worse. You guys don't have generals like Robert E. Lee. Right? You guys don't have Stonewall Jackson. You guys will lose, and you will lose bad in a kinetic conflict. The most peaceful and amicable and least amount of bloodshed fucking opportunity in front of you right now is actually basically for you guys to cut your bullshit and stop fucking trying to destroy the Constitution, or the Supreme Court steps in and then the executive branch enforces it. First indeed, you are first to say first. Not really though. You're second to say first, but they do have AI. Yeah, but AI, what is AI going to do for them?
With the beat of the drum and the fife so high, we march with courage under the sky. Banners wave and hearts on fire. In the name of freedom we aspire. Through valleys green and mountains gray,